It's October 11, 2008. This is Maximize Utility. I want to talk a minute about the current credit crunch and the related stock market crash and the impending recession. And I want to talk about it at a very high level. Why are we doing the things we do? What is the basic idea behind it? And if you're familiar with what's been going on, you know that the U.S. government is trying to keep markets moving, in particular financial markets. The U.S. government has set up a $700 billion fund that will go out and buy up a lot of bad debt off the balance sheets of banks and other financial institutions to keep them lending. Now, some people have made alternative suggestions. In fact, everybody and his brother and everybody and his sister out there trying to figure out the answer to this problem. And for example, there's an economist named R. Glenn Hubbard. He was the economist who, if Ben Bernanke did not become chairman of the Fed recently, it probably would have been Glenn Hubbard. He wrote an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal recently. He said he had a better idea. Instead of going to the banks and cleaning up their balance sheets, he says, let's go out and buy up all the mortgages of all these people who have mortgages they can't handle. And he calculated some numbers, and he said his program would cost $400, $500, $600 billion. And even if you're not an economist, you start scratching your head. Now, why is it we're going to go out there and take money from the average U.S. citizen, because we're going to be funding it with U.S. tax dollars, of course, and give it to people who have bad mortgages? Why don't we give it to people who have good mortgages? Why don't we give it to people who have no mortgages? Surely they're the thriftier people out there prone to make better economic decisions, and we put money in their hands? Well, we have the story. It comes from economics. It comes from textbook economics. It's this aggregate demand story about the economy. The economy doesn't go along by itself. It has to be constantly prodded along to keep demand going. It's a story, again, right out of the textbooks. It's a monetary and fiscal policy story, but it's about a macroeconomy that doesn't solve itself. We go back to the Great Depression and say that the economy doesn't work, that we have to stoke aggregate demand. So I see the congressman from the state of Massachusetts, Barney Frank, he says, and I quote, we have to prop up consumption. We have to keep people consuming, keep people spending. That's why we have to get the money in the hands of the people who spend the most recklessly. Here's where it comes from. We have a model, Y equals C plus I plus G. The GDP of the country is Y. We want to keep that GDP growing. Every year we want 3% more GDP or something like that. Back in the 1930s, we set up these national income accounts. We said there was an aggregate of consumption, all the stuff we consume, an aggregate of investment, all the stuff that primarily businesses invest, but also households in a way, and all that is spent by government. Now, C's the key player here. We want to keep people consuming. If we can keep this side, collectively these three quantities are aggregate demand, if we can keep that going up, then GDP will go up. That's why we have to prop up consumption. But again, you ask yourself, why are we encouraging people who spend too much to spend more? Does that make any sense? I tell you it doesn't make any sense. I tell you there's no such thing as a macroeconomy. There's no such thing as a business cycle. Sure, the economy, from time to time, it hits a rough spot. A number of bad things queue up, and we might not have good economic growth, or we might even have negative economic growth. But there's nothing the government can do about it. And as a compelling example, I propose this. In the last 18 months in this country, the U.S. government has done more monetary and fiscal policy than it did in the last 15 years, in a period through the 1990s and the early 2000s, where monetary and fiscal policy supposedly worked really well. Is it working today? And if not, why not? Is it really a demand-driven system?